Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. In the sun-drenched streets of Verona, where ancient grudges festered like wounds, two noble families, the Montagues and the Capulets, waged a bitter feud. Their enmity, rooted in forgotten slights, spilled blood and poisoned the air with hatred. The city's prince, Aeschylus, weary of their strife, had decreed peace under penalty of death, yet the rancor persisted, seething beneath the surface. Among the Montagues was young Romeo, a dreamer of 16, whose heart until recently burned for Rosaline, a lady who spurned his love. Melancholy shadowed him as he wandered Verona's alleys, sighing under the weight of unrequited affection. One evening, his cousin Benvolio, ever loyal, urged him to shake off his gloom. News had spread of a grand feast at the Capulets' house, and Benvolio, knowing Rosaline would attend, suggested they crash the revelry in masks to conceal their Montague blood. Romeo, though hesitant, agreed, drawn by the faint hope of seeing his beloved. The Capulet mansion glowed with torchlight as lords and ladies danced, their laughter mingling with the clink of goblets. Old Capulet, the patriarch, welcomed his guests, while his wife and daughter Juliet moved among them. Juliet, not yet 14, was a vision of grace, her eyes bright with youth, but untouched by love. Her mother, Lady Capulet, spoke of Paris, a noble kinsman of the prince, who sought her hand. Juliet, obedient yet unenthused, listened as her mother pressed the suit. Unseen, Romeo and his friends slipped into the feast, their faces hidden. The moment Romeo's eyes fell upon Juliet, Rosaline vanished from his heart. Her beauty, radiant as starlight, struck him breathless. He stood transfixed, whispering to himself that he had never known true love until now. Across the crowded hall, Juliet felt his gaze, and their eyes met, sparking a silent vow. When Romeo approached, his words flowed like poetry, their hands touching in a moment that felt like a sacred rite. "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine," he murmured, likening her to a saint, "my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Juliet, charmed by his boldness, answered with equal wit, and in that exchange, their souls entwined. But fate was cruel. Tybalt, Juliet's fiery cousin, recognized Romeo's voice. Enraged that a Montague dared invade their hall, he demanded blood, only to be restrained by old Capulet, who, mindful of the prince's edict, forbade violence at his feast. Tybalt seethed, vowing revenge. As the night ended, Romeo and Juliet learned each other's names from the nurse, Juliet's confidant. The revelation struck like a dagger. He was a Montague, she a Capulet. Their love was forbidden, born under a cursed star. Yet love, once kindled, defies reason. That night, Romeo scaled the walls of the Capulet orchard, drawn to Juliet's balcony. Hidden in the shadows, he heard her voice, soft as moonlight, confessing her love for him. "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" she sighed, lamenting the name that made him her enemy. "Deny thy father, and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet." Her words emboldened him, and he stepped forward, declaring his devotion. Startled but unafraid, Juliet returned his vows, and under the stars, they pledged their hearts, promising to marry despite the feud. At dawn, Romeo sought Friar Lawrence, a kindly priest who saw in the lovers' union a chance to end the strife between their houses. Though wary of Romeo's sudden shift from Rosaline, the friar agreed to wed them in secret, hoping love might heal Verona's wounds. Meanwhile, Juliet sent her nurse to Romeo with a message arranging their marriage. By afternoon, in the friar's humble cell, Romeo and Juliet exchanged vows, their joy a fleeting oasis in a desert of hate. But Verona's streets were not so kind. That same day, Tybalt, still burning with rage, challenged Romeo to a duel. Romeo, now bound to Juliet and unwilling to fight her kin, refused, his words gentle but firm. Mercutio, Romeo's fiery friend, took offense at this slight to Montague honor and drew his sword against Tybalt. Their blades clashed under the scorching sun, and Romeo, desperate to stop the fight, stepped between them. In that fatal moment, Tybalt's sword pierced Mercutio's side. "A plague, O both your houses," Mercutio cursed as he fell, his lifeblood staining the stones. Grief and guilt consumed Romeo, and when Tybalt returned, mocking the death, Romeo's restraint shattered. He fought Tybalt in a blind fury, slaying him with a single thrust. The city erupted in chaos. The prince arrived, his patience worn thin. Benvolio pleaded Romeo's case, but Lady Capulet demanded justice for her nephew's death. Aeschylus, torn between mercy and law, banished Romeo from Verona, decreeing death should he return. Romeo fled to Friar Lawrence's cell, despairing that exile was worse than death, for it meant separation from Juliet. The friar urged patience, promising to find a way to reunite the lovers. Meanwhile, the nurse brought Juliet news of Tybalt's death and Romeo's banishment. Torn between grief for her cousin and love for her husband, Juliet wept, but her heart remained true to Romeo. The nurse, ever loyal, carried a message to him, and that night, Romeo slipped into Juliet's chamber. In the tender hours before dawn, they shared their love, clinging to each other as if to defy the breaking day. But sorrow multiplied. Old Capulet, unaware of Juliet's secret marriage, pressed her to wed Paris in 3 days' time, believing the match would lift her grief for Tybalt. Juliet refused, her heart breaking under her father's threats and her mother's cold dismissal. Desperate, she sought Friar Lawrence's counsel. The friar devised a daring plan. Juliet would drink a potion to mimic death, lying in a deep sleep for 42 hours. The friar would send word to Romeo, who would return to Verona, retrieve her from the Capulet tomb, and flee together to Mantua. Juliet agreed, her courage steeled by love. That night, alone in her chamber, she drank the potion, her fears of waking too soon or suffocating in the tomb, drowned by her trust in the plan. The next morning, the Capulet household awoke to horror. Juliet lay cold and still. Her wedding preparations turned to funeral rites. The nurses' wails echoed through the house as old Capulet, Lady Capulet, and Paris mourned their loss. Friar Lawrence, feigning sorrow, oversaw her burial in the family vault, while secretly dispatching a letter to Romeo in Mantua through Friar John. But fate, relentless, wove its cruelest thread. Friar John, detained by a quarantine, never reached Romeo. Instead, Romeo's servant, Balthasar, brought news of Juliet's death. Unaware of the friar's plan, stricken with grief, Romeo resolved to join his beloved in death. He purchased a deadly poison from an apothecary and rode to Verona under cover of night, his heart a storm of anguish. At the Capulet tomb, he encountered Paris, who had come to mourn Juliet. Mistaking Romeo for a vandal, Paris challenged him. In the moonlit graveyard, their swords clashed, and Romeo, driven by despair, slew Paris. With a whispered apology, he entered the tomb. There lay Juliet, pale and still, yet radiant in her false death. Romeo, believing her gone forever, knelt beside her. "O my love, my wife," he wept, "death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath hath had no power yet upon thy beauty." With a final kiss, he drank the poison and fell dead at her side. Moments later, Juliet awoke. Seeing Romeo's lifeless body, she cried out in agony, her world shattered. She found his poison vial empty, and with no means to follow him in death, she took his dagger instead. "O happy dagger," she whispered, "this is thy sheath." With a swift thrust, she joined her husband in eternity. The tomb became a scene of reckoning. Friar Lawrence arrived too late, finding both lovers dead. The prince, summoned by the watch, gathered the Montagues and Capulets. The friar confessed all, the secret marriage, the potion, the failed message. In the face of such loss, the family's feud seemed petty, its cost unbearable. Old Montague, grieving his son, and old Capulet, broken by his daughter's death, clasped hands in reconciliation. The prince, his voice heavy, declared, "All are punished," and Verona mourned under a sky dimmed by sorrow. In the end, the lovers' deaths forged peace where their love could not. A golden statue was raised to honor Romeo and Juliet, their story a timeless lament of love thwarted by hate, a tale of woe that would echo through Verona's streets forever.